Good afternoon. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation of coming to a dinner party and then that the host of the dinner party was a little embarrassed that he didn't have a seat for you at his table. Well, that happened to me this morning. When I came here, I had no idea that I would be standing in front of you to give this presentation about the Karen project. And I'm happy to do so. I want to make that very clear. I've been given this opportunity to show you one of the regions that has not come on the table today. We've had South America, we've had Latin America, and we have Africa, we've had the Arabic countries, we have had the Asian countries, but we have not heard of the Central Asian countries. I want to make the link with infrastructures and the Central Asian countries for you. As said, I am from the University of Groningen, always obliged to have the small commercial part of it. We're quite an old university. We have celebrated our 400 years existence last year, and we have always had the traditions, not all 400 years of course, but the last 50, to have our own infrastructure. We are of course participating in national infrastructure projects, but because of our northern role that we've had our own high-performance computers. We've also supporting the predecessor of the SKA project in South Africa, that is the LOFA project in Europe. So we are quite well into infrastructure, IT infrastructure. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. Since 2000, I have also been involved in many international projects involving providing ICT for research and education. And that is a global process. This is the overview of many of the networks that you've seen and heard of today, from Asia down to Latin America. And they're all interconnected, and they have as reason that they want to provide researchers and students, but especially the researchers, with access to the global infrastructure that has also been mentioned here before me. The European Commission plays a very important role in interconnecting these networks. They are involved in all of the networks shown here in this overview to create a national, global network infrastructure to give access to these research infrastructures that we've been talking about today. And the overview of the projects that have been going, that you are close by having these networks, is symbolized in this overview here. If I go to Central Asia, short overview, the first network that I was involved there, was already in 2000, was a satellite-based network connecting the 5 Central Asian countries and the 3 Southern Caucasus countries to a central hub in Germany, and with gigantic bandwidth of around the 128 kilobit per second in the beginning. But that was 2000. That has slowly evolved into a fiber optic network that has been funded since 2009 by the European Union, the European Commission. They're funding 80 to 90% of the total cost. The other costs have to come from the countries themselves. In the NATO time, it was 100% funded externally. And up to 2015, the co-funding, 10 to 20%, came from the national research and education network organizations in the country. That was proved that is not sustainable because they are competing at the national level with internet service providers. Very often these are incumbents, the national monopolists that they're competing against, and they see if they compete on tariffs, and that's what they're doing until now, that they're losing the game. You cannot compete with tariffs if you just want to serve the academic community in your country. The other players are too large and they will push you out of the market. So you need to come with things that are additional to cheap connectivity. And that is the step that we have to make towards the future. And that will provide its own challenges. To show you this with what these Central Asian countries are, they're high up in the mountains, above India, below Russia, to the east is China, and to the west, the East European countries. So it's a very strategic, important region also, have always been so, and are quite isolated. Most of the countries are above the 3,000 meters in mountainous countries, so the infrastructure, the connectivity is very poor in these countries, and there's very large challenge to get these countries connected. Going back to the next phase that we're going into, that the NRS cannot compete with internationals and with internet service providers. We have heard today also that sustainability is very important for research infrastructures, also for research networks. And very often you turn towards government for your support. Well, the challenge in Central Asia is the governments do not care, really. And this is also the case in many other countries in the world. The governments are not willing to provide any support for research and education in their countries. They're always looking outside of the region. That is the tradition. It was formerly, they were Russian, were part of the Soviet Union. They got their funding from Moscow. That fell away. And there's no tradition to fund infrastructure, fund higher education, fund research in these countries. And that is the step that we have to make in the coming years. At this moment, we are negotiating with the Commission, and the Commission is negotiating with the governments of these countries to pay partly for the infrastructure. In the next phase, it will be depending on the GDP of the countries, because ironically, in contrast to many other countries, if you look at a country like Kazakhstan, that has a GDP that is very high because all the oil and the gas they have in the country, but very little is going to the countries themselves. And if you make the link then, and I've named the challenges and conclusions at the same time, what you have to look at, and here the link with research infrastructures and initiatives like Change Red come into the picture. Sustainability is a very important goal to reach. And sustainability does not mean that you have to earn all your own funding, but you have to get funding from government or from other donors to have a long-term view of to provide a stable infrastructure for your researchers. And one of the first things that we are doing, and that's not only in Central Asia, but also in a working group that is active on a global level, is that you have to identify the national priorities in the countries, and these are different per country, where government can be seduced to provide funding. If they do not provide funding for research infrastructures, SEC, just to do some research, they might be interested to provide substantial funding for activities for research that helps them with other national priorities. For example, one of the major issues in the mountainous countries is erosion and climate change and water management. And how can you use your networks and your research infrastructures to do that? And for this, you need to get out of your isolation and collaborate on a global level. Collaborate with researchers in Europe, in the Americas, and also within Africa. And the network not only provides your global human connectivity, but also provides the access to e-infrastructures that are not available within the countries. There is, in the whole of Central Asia, to my knowledge, available for researchers, one high-performance computing system in Almaty at the Center for High Performance Computing. And it is running idle. It's hardly being used, not because there is no need for it, because it is not connected to the national network. They do not have the funds to build a high-performance computing system, a cluster, but it's not connected, let alone it's connected to outside infrastructures. And these are things that you can change with this network. There's something else that's also something that we run against, and we've not heard much of it today, but I know that in other regions of the world there's also a problem, is that there is a huge gap in knowledge of using e-infrastructures in Central Asia. I've been working in Africa, in Zambia, Mozambique, and the same applies there also, not so much in South Africa, I think, but that is also a reason that even if you have your infrastructure, you have your access to your infrastructure, that you still need to do a lot on capacity building for the researchers to make use of these new tools. And that is something that is not done with a few workshops here and there. It's a long-term, year-long-term process to make that switch. So this is also why you're running around in circles, why a project like Change Red is important, and it should be continued to the future also, at least the concept, even though the project itself is ending, because regions like Central Asia, they do not have their own infrastructure, and with Chain Red's project, we can provide access to those researchers who have the capabilities to make good use of these global infrastructures. And I want to thank you for your attention that you gave me. Thank you.